loud. Okay. Hey, welcome everyone.
Yeah, looks like we've got a few people joining right now. I'm going to be mostly silent on this one, outside of maybe asking some questions. I know that hasn't been the typical, but team topologies is just something that I get why it's important, but I think it's also really a difficult topic. So JGP, why did you choose this topic specifically? And then Eric, and you can kind of kick off into what you wanted to talk about specifically related to team topologies.
Well, I picked this topic because it's one of the chapter of our book, and Eric wanted to talk about it to promote the book, so that's why he's here. Uh, I'm just kidding, everyone. So no, I think it's important, and I think it's really about trying to understand how people organize themselves around data mesh. Okay, and and I'm curious about to exchange around that. Okay, so I think it's a team. Like when you say team topology, it sounds like very scientific, but it's really about organizing your team. So that's really where what I'm thinking about. So, Eric, you've got another definition?
No, team topology is really, I mean, if you boil it down, is what teams do you have or do you need to deliver a data mesh solution at scale? And then what do those actual teams look like, and who do they interact with? It's that simple. Now, the reason why I think it's simple, but it's very, very important is, I mean, to quote Zhamak Dehghani, person who created data mesh, it's a socio-technical endeavor. And all too often, I'm super guilty of this, by the way. We focus on the tech side, the technology, not recognizing the fact that it's really about how you change an organization and team and people's behavior to actually do something different. So just in one of the phrases that Jean-Georges uses quite a bit is we bring agile practices to data. That's what data mesh tries to do. Well, it's like going from waterfall, which had a process and a team structure, to agile, where you had federated teams and a whole bunch of different steps in the process. Same thing here. We're going from a centralized data world to something that is hopefully much more agile, and things change. The structure of your teams, the way they interact, and the roles and responsibilities within those teams is different. And that's really the simple part. Now, the last thing I would say, one thing I should say is, again, I'm super guilty of this, is I tend to focus on the technology side, but my experience having delivered this for large organizations, it's 80% people and 20% technology. If you can't figure out how to get the people reoriented and bought in, and structured for success, your data mesh will stay small, and probably not have the impact that you're. Anyway, that's my 2 cents worth, Jean-Georges and Scott.
So Scott, okay, about the timing thing as well. You know, we've got about half of the people right now who are from Europe, and they did not mess up the time. So thank you for being on time. You know, because yeah, it's Europe changed time last weekend. We in the US and Canada have not changed time, and it should be next weekend. So, but still working. We make it work. So, but I'm curious about other people here as well. So, what are you? What are you expecting from that, or are you already um working on a data mesh, and what's the structure of your teams, and then we can get a little bit into what I'm seeing and what Eric is saying. And even if Eric and I were writing a book together, we don't have the same view on things, so which is really interesting at times. So I don't know. Does anyone want to participate here or have an opinion on that, or? So one thing I'm seeing in our Salome, you just unmuted. Do you want to add something?
Well, I'm new, so I would like to see the. Okay. Well, my question is that it's true that I'm working with several customers in the journey to change from centralized environments to distributed environment, data mesh or data fabric. So the challenge is during the journey you are managing an hybrid data environment. So I read your articles about data contracts and so on, but I would like to know more about what do you recommend, how to help our customer in this journey of transformation.
That's so today we're trying to focus on, so Salome and I, we go way back. She's new to the roundtable, so welcome, Salome. I'm happy
I'm
to see you
sorry,
here.
because of that I didn't want to start
No,
asking.
it's
I
fine.
want to know.
It's fine.
Sorry for that.
I am part of different mafias. It's okay. So, but anyway, um, today we're trying to focus on how we organize teams. Okay, so, one thing that I have seen, and Scott, with all the people you've interviewed, is that there's really a bit of a confusion about the team who's building data mesh, and that the team which is building data products, and then the teams that are in ops. Do you see that as well?
Yeah, so a lot of what this conversation for me, I mean, we've talked about historically who should be the data product developer. Should it be somebody from the central team that comes in and develops for the domain, and as they're kind of lifting up the domain's capabilities? Should they only be a consulting architecture type team that comes in and helps the team but doesn't do any of the development? Should you have kind of this application or this analytics engineer that's doing it? And I think then the question also becomes, what is the long stream of that? Like, what happens once a domain has a data product, right? If you have people that are doing work from outside and then leave, is it still a product? You have a team that's really owning it and doing that. So Team Topologies talks a little bit about delivering work in different streams and things like that. You have enablement teams, you have kind of the operating teams, you have all this stuff. Like I said, I've tried to dig into it, and it just kind of somewhat goes over my head. But where I'm seeing, I don't think there is an exact answer, but where I'm seeing people really get confused is, how should we organize? So maybe we could talk a little bit about figuring that out. Like, how do you, Eric, you've consulted with multiple companies on this. JGP, you're starting to do the same. How do you think about having that conversation with them where they go, there are 8 million different options. Like, what should we do? How do we think about what's long-lived, what's short-lived? Like, and who owns what?
Yeah, well, I'll take a stab at it, and then Jean-Georges, you obviously have some good ideas on this, but the very first tendency of folks is to create a platform team. And by the way, I'm saying that this is the first tendency. I think it's the wrong approach, by the way. And that platform team ends up being, containing some great tools, maybe a data stack, and folks want to encourage the use of that, maybe an API platform, what have you. But that actually is not where you should be starting. The very first thing you should start is rally around a business outcome. But we're not going to talk about that per se, but let's say you have a good business outcome. The very first thing you do is you need to think about what your data product team actually is. And the data product team can be relatively simple, but obviously you have to have a bounded context. This is all stuff from Zamack's principles in the book. Bounded context, an owner, and somebody that actually has decision rights and is accountable for the evolution of that data product. So that's the very first thing. And that data product owner has to find a way to deliver that business outcome. Presumably, if they're successful, we'll have more data products. Now, as you get the first data product team, okay, and I'm going to quote a lot from Team Topologies, Matthew Skeletons in Manuel Pais's book. Fantastic, by the way. You should go get it, read it cover to cover. It's fantastic. But they call them stream aligned teams. And these are the core teams that deliver value. They're aligned to a business outcome. There's ownership within that team, nice bounded context. Now, the good problem that you have if you're successful with the very first data product in the data product team is you have another data product, another data product team. Eventually you may have 3 or 4. By the time you have your second or third is when you can start to think about platform team. What are the common services that I may need to put in place? Maybe I need an API platform for my discovery or observability endpoints. Maybe I need to have an opportunity to standardize around some data models or data contracts, that type of thing. But those only are concerns. They're good concerns, but they're only concerns once you have a set of data products that need to be out there. So start with data products, get 1 or 2 successful. Then you start to think about common services, the platform team. Then you start to think about, as you get your 3rd, 4th, 5th, what we found is you need a consulting team, or in the team topology book terminology, they call them enabling teams. And that's a team that helps sell and helps teams adopt data mesh very quickly. And again, like I said, that's a good problem to have, because by the time you need that capability, that consulting capability, you probably have 4 to 5 different data products, and you're starting to think about, how do I do this at scale? So that's the order of operations that I see, and that obviously will dictate, what's within the data product team, what's within the platform team or teams, and what's within the enabling teams.
So Eric, first, if you create 1 or few data products, then the platform.
That's been my so they can all happen in parallel, by the way, but the data, you don't have a business case for the platform team if you only have 1 data product. So you need to start with a win and preferably a second win, which then drives the opportunity to create that platform team, which is largely, first off, most enterprises have the capability somewhere in there. What ends up happening is the platform team sells the capability, if you will, to the various data product owners. The data product owners, again, are the kings or queens of their kingdom. They reign supreme. They make the decisions. So the platform team mentality is, I'm selling capability.
Did we lose Eric?
He froze for me too.
All right.
A little bit different approach.
You froze for a sec. Did you have a 3rd point, Eric? You said one of few data products, platform eventually in parallel, and then do you have a 3rd thing, or?
Yeah, you froze for a good 30, 40 seconds.
Oh, okay. My apologies. You know what? I'll probably pause there and not talk too much. I'll let some folks ask some questions. We'll see where things go.
Well, and I'll say that that's not necessarily the standard thinking as to when you create the platform team. And part of this starts to get into incentivization, which I don't think we want to talk about today, because that's a rat hole that is extremely deep. That goes all the way through to the other side of the earth. But there is a question as to, do you build too much too soon? And that's a tendency for a lot of companies, is to, you feel safe in building out the technology platform. So that's what you end up doing. And I do agree that people go way too far with building out the platform. And what Zhamak has said for the platform is, for the first data product, you probably just you should pick a use case where you just need to store some data, right? You don't need anything more complicated than storing some data and giving some access to some data and things like that. So, but it's an interesting approach as to, you're saying, figure out, 1, get the business case, get enough money or enough proof that you can get money to do this, and 2, to get to understand really what your platform needs to do, because most people think it needs to be this super complex thing. And in a lot of cases, the people that I'm interviewing are telling me that's not the case. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking exactly along what Zhamak is saying, is you need to start small and humble, and you have to earn the right to grow. And what that means, to Zamek's point, is just get some data and start to make it accessible, deliver some value. You don't need a data platform to do that.
I want to recenter the debate. Okay, it's about team topologies, so it's really not about how you organize, about building. It's about, thing as a people. Okay, because as you said, Eric, we're talking too much about technology here. It's about the people. Okay, so we've got the people building the platform, which can do in parallel to building the data products. Obviously, you need a little bit of something to get started doing the products, right? So, because is it tooling? Is it just using VI to write your data contracts, or there's still a little bit of initial tooling, right? Like, or
first off, there is. But here's the interesting part about it, and this is the team dynamics that are important, is it's actually the data product owner's choice whether they want to use VI or Vim, or they want to use something else, or they want to use, Snowflake, or they want to use, some cloud data vendor or data set. It's actually the data product owner's choice to do it. And like going back to my previous one, my suggestion is make it simple.
Okay. Does anyone have an opinion there? Because I have an opinion there.
Almost everybody has an opinion on that point, by the way.
I think if people listening here should have an opinion.
And I do like Austin's question as well in the chat, that I think is like, how do we go from where we are, because it's brownfield, right? No companies are completely brand new that should be looking at data mesh. How do you go from where we are to where we should go, and how fast do we go along that? Do we, reorganize up front, reorganize later, like carve out all of that? I think that's a great question as to how do you get going versus what should the picture look like in year two? And that's at the domain level and the organization level too.
I was just gonna say, I feel like sometimes I wish there was like the honest conversation of, at the end of the day, there's a lot of, we're individuals who are incentivized, right? Like we get paid to work for companies. So it's like, how does a data team get their bonus at the end of the year? Like that determines a lot of who actually has the control of what happens in a data org. So sometimes I disagree that the data product owner does have a say in what technologies and how the process works. I mean, sometimes it's the loudest stakeholder group that is the one that's driving your backlog, right? And I think as you want to build data products, a lot of the team topology stuff needs to start with aligning incentives. Like if you're incentivized just to implement a new tool, or if it's, did you complete the sprint on time? Are you executing from an operational standpoint? I think that becomes very hard to make any kind of significant change when it comes to building out a data mesh, right? Because number one, you may have to step back from things that you've built and maintained for years and say, okay, I'm not the owner of this, even though I built it and I'm theoretically responsible for it. If it breaks, I think there has to be that conversation for existing use cases where, yeah, we now may have this data product owner function. And here is like the realigned, responsible, accountable, consulted, informed kind of matrix. It's signed off on. This is now your new incentive plan. This, like there's a lot of individual components I think that need to come in when that come into play when it comes to forming like a new team that might have to take over something and convince the person who originally was responsible for it that this new model will work and that it won't affect them personally. And I think that's where the culture change elements comes into topologies too. I'll just put that out there, but.
So first off, I agree, but I've talked far too much. So Jean-Georges, what are your thoughts? And I'll give my thoughts.
Well, just the thing is, for me, the role of the data product owner is really very often undermined, but he's not responsible for the technology stack. That's not his role. I think is the tech stack, like Snowflake versus Redshift versus DB2 warehouse. that's an architecture decision. And going back to what Scott was saying, it's also the idea of, hey, this is brownfield, right? So if you're coming in and you're saying, hey, I'm going to change the database the same as the enterprise or the data warehouse system at the same time as I'm also going to put data mesh in place, might be an interesting result. So
Now, here's been my experience, and this is kind of like, I won't tell you the client, but it's a real world experience. There's kind of the theme here is you have to anchor yourself on a business outcome. So where we kicked off one of the very first data mesh in your enterprise-wide data meshes a few years ago, is we had two situations. One, there was a mini crisis that had to be addressed and had CEO, EVP level awareness and buy-in to make something happen. So that was a catalyst that allowed us to build one of our first data products. The second one was a revenue opportunity where this company was going into a brand new geographic market. And if they were able to do it in 6 to 9 months, they would be able to beat their competitors, and it would be a huge win. Now, the reason, those are two examples of the outcomes that we had. Now, here's the thing that defines a good outcome. A good outcome far exceeds any cost. Okay, so here's the challenge that most folks have and that I see in organizations. And this is where data mesh gets stuck, is where you have an IT owner, and IT by their very nature is cost aligned. The business is revenue opportunity aligned. So if IT owns the data product, you will be perpetually focused on cost. And you will have to sit there. The primary discussion will be, you can save cost by using these enterprise platforms, and you're avoiding the discussion that you really need. If you have an opportunity, okay, first of all, any cost in lieu of a benefit is just expensive. If you have an opportunity, the business will tell you, if you had talked to the right folks, any revenue opportunity will probably exceed the IT costs by 1 or 2 orders of magnitude. So if you can, the very first data product has to align to a business outcome, and it has to align to an executive that feels the pain or feels the opportunity and has the wherewithal to make a difference. Here's the interesting thing. If you wait to get that one and you actually deliver on it, the next one, first off, you have a very senior executive spokesperson, you have real results, and the second and third are just like falling dominoes. That is the secret to success.
Okay. Zaki, you had a question or a comment?
Yeah, I think part of the topology, depends on the operating model of the company. I think the operating model is absolutely important. So in some organizations, generally speaking, I'm not referring to EA in specific, like there are pods, and every pod is responsible for their own insights, generally speaking. So the pods or the organizations that have decentralized teams, I think the way we're seeing it is they're looking for insights, really. They don't want to build an API. They don't want to build a stack. They don't want to build any kind of this. This is more of in the pipes and the weeds for them. And I think when they need the capabilities of, hey, we need some complexity, quote unquote enablement, they always reach the central team through a chargeback model. Say, hey, guys, can you build us this capabilities for us to build an insight? I think this is where the operating model clear a lot of these ambiguities, in my opinion.
So the operating model will differ from one company to another, right? And
yeah,
I think what you're describing is a bit of the central model, which creates a bottleneck. So you've got the different pods, the analytics pod, who are building their data product or their insight or whatever is linked to them, and then but they need some central level capabilities to do that. So the whole idea with data mesh is to enable and give more power to the pod, if I use your terminology, so they can do more by themselves. Now it's easier said than done, and you will still need some kind of central team to define, for example, policies, or what Eric was talking about when we're building a platform, right? So the platform is probably not the responsibility of each pod, but more like a central team. But is it the data team? Okay, which is often the central team? I don't think so.
I'm having difficulty with the maybe it's a semantic thing, and this is food for thought, really. I'm having difficulty with the platform, quote unquote, team. I think it's more of a center of excellence for me. It's not really a service team. That's the way I'm kind of seeing it. Like,
Well,
like you said, every pod, they have their engineers, they have their analysts, they have their BI, they have their data scientists, etc.
Yeah.
There is some level of centralization for the organization to provide compute and storage capabilities, let's put it that way. But I think as a service, I think here comes more of guidelines, not only governance, but in terms of, hey, these are the engineering documentation practices we're going to follow. This is the framework we need to follow. This is the steps to use Airflow, for example. This is the steps to wireframe your dashboards, for example. More of guidelines and center of excellence. I'm still struggling with the platform as a platform. Are they really a platform or not really?
Yeah, so I'll take a stab at it. Far too often platforms, you mentioned the word chargeback, it's indicative of your traditional IT construct where you're optimized for cost. You have an intake process. Somebody throws something onto a ServiceNow request or something like that. And at some point in time, it gets estimated, and then people at some point get assigned, and then at some point something gets delivered. That is a central model. That is exactly what data mesh is trying to address and break, and go to a much more decentralized model. The alternative, the new platform team, is one that, first off, it's not mandated. They have to sell their capability. It's delivered as a service. But somebody actually is paying for that capability. And if they run out of funding, that team collapses. Okay, that platform team collapses. That is not the model that is in any of the IT organizations I've typically seen. Now, there's two ways to actually structure that. What Zhamak highlights, which may be perhaps an ideal, is you put the technology, as much technology as you possibly can, into the data product team. And then you hopefully get some synergies as that happens, across multiple things, as opposed to being mandated to use something. The moment you have somebody mandating use a platform is the time where that centralized team, I hate to say it, but does not have accountability for delivering the services as needed. So it is an operating model, but the fact that you mentioned chargeback is in a centralized context is indicative of the fact that you probably have an old style platform and you have an opportunity to create a new style platform to solve some of those problems.
Sorry, Linda, did you want to go?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I kind of want to ask, I have two questions. Actually, I agree with Austin because, most of our corporation, already, historically already have platform, right? From the data warehouse, now data lake, and, and then we try, because of the whole data mesh concept coming, and then we try to now fit that into the existing, organizational structure. And I found that, especially when Eric, you just mentioned the, in terms of platform team, because we are very central platform team, and the platform team is, think about like Apple, right? The platform team is just providing the tooling for any of the business line or technology line to building their stuff. And now I feel that more and more, the more I'm looking at this field, it's not going to be 100%. It's not going to follow Zermac's, the model which she envisioned, that the data product team will come with their own tooling and everyone else coming from their own tooling, then we kind of collaborate. And I think more and more be more for the platform team. It does exist, because then on the side there would be, starting pockets area of data product team, and agree it's just coming from business. And they also have technology folks that, which I see this more for that data product team could potentially have the business and the technology, and also have the people in the so-called enablement, I think which you mentioned, that enablement. So this way they were using the tooling which is provided by the platform team. Do you see that's the, like based on your experience, and do you see that's happening in the market?
Yeah, like every organization is a little bit different. There's some organizations that actually can make centralization work, and there's some organizations, some I've written the book about it, where the centralization does not work. I think the key guiding test, if you will, is the team acting in a fashion that the data product owners want them to act? Are the data product owners willing to pay for the service? I can tell you there's no data product owner, no business owner that likes the current IT process where something goes into intake and it gets estimated, and then somebody gets assigned and somebody calls back, and then 3 weeks later somebody has an estimate that's far too high because they didn't know how to estimate it properly. That is the model is absolutely broken. And if that's the central platform you have, it will not work it will not deliver the results you expect. So the key here is the goal that you have is you want to have a platform team that actually delivers the results you expect. There's a bunch of different ways to do that, but the centralized model that you're talking about is not the way that's going to get you there.
Because the way I see it is, obviously the whole so-called centralized platform team is based on, deliver tooling based on each of the use case. You could say the use case coming from data product team, right? And so, like based on each use case, you build the tooling to enable that. So this way, even though it's a centralized team, but in a way that it's carved out based on the use case. This way will help in terms of agility, right? Like the time to market, because otherwise, yes, the traditional centralized team, no way you can deliver.
Yeah, I think I like what I'm hearing, by the way. I guess I'll pause after I say this. The shorter the distance between the outcome and the delivery of the service, the better. And the further the distance, the more intake and complexity that you have in the old centralized world. So it sounds like you're shortening the distance between the platform team and the actual outcome you want to deliver, which is great news.
Yeah, and another thing, which I kind of want to ask all of you, that in like that enablement team, right? Traditionally, we always have a data governance team. How did that change in terms of this data mesh build? Because I'm closing the gap between the data product and platform team, but then sometimes I feel the governance become a little overhead.
John George, I know you have a perspective, so I'll keep quiet. I have an opinion, but I'll wait to Jean George comments.
Oh well, first I didn't. I think the a lot of what I heard so far was really about opposing centralized team to distributed or decentralized team. And my take on data mesh is that it's federated. Okay, so, and it's not only federated for governance, but it's also federated for platform and for data products and the various things. It's completely, and it's a big difference is a lot of people say, okay, we're going to do decentralized. So basically it's almost looking like we're doing an all shadow IT somewhere. Okay. And that's not the idea. Okay. It's not about doing things in your own little corner with your, if I take Zaki's definition, is a little pod. Okay. But you still need the central part. So the example I often use when it comes to governance is in some countries the data retention is different than other countries. Okay, and especially in the financial business units and the financial domain. So sometimes it's 5 years, sometimes 7, sometimes 10 years. And the thing is, if you've got a central team defining, hey, the central governance for keeping financial data is 10 years, okay, then you, or let's say 3 years, then you've got problems in Australia, for example. So that's where your federated architecture in terms of governance works better. It's because you can bring in knowledge from other requirements that are that are linked to the team. Okay, so yes, it changes when you're doing governance within data mesh, but it also it enables more subtle management of it.
Anything like in this case, right? Anything the data governance team should be done differently, right? In this case.
So Linda, we have I have a first of building on what Jean-Georges mentioned. So today governance is a bad word, mostly because it's policies plus policing together, and that approach has its challenges, and I think that's why you're asking the question. The approach that I've seen work very successfully, and this is what I think Jean-Marc means by federated governance, at least I'm reading between the lines, and what Jean-Georges mentions, is the data product owner is responsible for governance. Okay, so that means that the governance, somebody has to create the policies, typically based off of privacy rules, security, regulatory constraints, whatever they are. That's a central organization because you want to have that done properly and done once. However, the policing, if you will, I think is a problem-prone approach. Rather, the approach we take, and I've seen very successful, we call it certification. So if you look very carefully at, I don't know how it is in Europe, Scott, but if you look at any plug, electrical plug in the United States and Canada, it has a little thing. In Canada, it's a CSA, Canadian Standards Organization label. And in the United States, it's American Standards Organization. So what does that mean? It means, first off, you know that plug's not going to burn your house down because they have certified that they meet the policy. Who did that? Well, the manufacturer of the product. Okay. So the same approach we have for data products. The data product owner is responsible and accountable for meeting the governance rules, the governance policies put in place, but they certify. There's no other group coming in and policing them. The data product team certifies that they meet the policies and they publish that or make it accessible by an API or something like that. So now what you've done is you've delegated the responsibility. You make it visible at any point in time to anybody, the governance organization, architecture, whoever you wish, even regulators in some cases. And you have a level of confidence because it's transparent and it's always available. Very, very different approach. It's federated governance, to use Jean-Georges' words.
This will require a set of tooling being able. Otherwise, we do have this standard, and to enforce a different data product team to do this, it's a mercy, right? And end up, we actually had to review everything. So I think it has to build in as part of maybe even platform, the CI/CD pipeline, and all the thing to kind of automate this whole thing. Like, do you have that any experience on that? Like, what's the best way to approach it?
Absolutely. It's a data product owner's responsibility.
Okay. Stop.
Anyway.
Because the thing is, okay, I'm going to police now. Okay, first it's 110. Eric, you're invited here. You're talking far too much. Okay, we want to hear from other people. Austin, you had your hand raised, and maybe you were blown away by Eric and you didn't have the time to get to ask your question. So, Austin, I want you to ask your question.
No, I like what Eric was saying. I
was the only one.
What's that?
You're the only one.
Ouch.
I'm
just kidding.
I mean, I think the original question was sort of like, okay, so we're talking about platform teams, product teams, where is a governance function? And I've been dealing with this a lot, I think, in the past few weeks. Just, I think governance groups or the function is following a similar trajectory as data and analytics teams in general, which was historically governance probably came from a regulatory standpoint, which meant like in highly regulated industries, financial services, healthcare, there was a third party telling you exactly what governance meant. Like you have a risk team in banks and financial services organizations. So like risk was the governance team. And yeah, they had to implement this in technology, but they started in one function, much like many data and analytics teams started reporting to the CFO, right? It started out of a financial function, or it started out of a marketing function, and they sort of accidentally became the data and analytics experts. And so people from outside of those functions started asking them for things. That's kind of where governance is happening now, which is, hey, we want to do data and analytics better. You're the people that tell us how data needs to look. Can you now tell us how data needs to look in this other function? And just like data and analytics people said, I know nothing about your actual function, governance teams today are going to say the same thing. Governance teams are going to say, I don't know anything about what marketing data should look like. I only know this from a legal standpoint. I can tell you what you can't have in your data, or I can tell you, something else. And so governance is really just becoming, like, we have a lot of customers that refuse to even say the word governance internally. They just say data enablement, right? Like it's how you get better at data and analytics. Now that might mean not displaying sensitive information. That might mean improving the performance of your data pipelines. That might mean reducing your costs to produce those results and reduce, like financial governance. But I think it's going to follow, like from a topology standpoint, we'll follow into that kind of, hey, there's a central global team that can put 80% of the global enterprise standards for data out there. But then, as Eric was saying, you're going to have the closer to the problem domain product owners, domain data product owners that will have to put that last 20% in. And probably assumed but not like brought up point about a lot of this transparency is governance also includes, like, what does that metric mean? It's not just how do we produce data, but if another function or another data product manager wants to use the data products that I'm responsible for, part of governance also becomes they need to know exactly what it is, what it means, where it came from. And I think this is where data governance platforms start to get into, like, lineage being so important, not just for audits, but to communicate transparently to someone else that, hey, this data product was created like this, and I documented it as such. So like data provenance becomes more of like an enabling function than it does retroactively for audits and risk and things like that. So I'll pause there. That was just what I was thinking.
I have like about a 10-word response, which is everybody's trying to solve for all the problems up front. We have to do this iteratively. We have to give ourselves the space to do this. And so that's where you pick problems, use cases that aren't going to get you in trouble. You don't do heavy PII early. You don't do these things so the governance team can learn how to enable people.
Maybe one last thing in response to that, something I talked about with someone on Monday, like data teams are exceptionally good at making the rest of the organization who may not be, I don't even want to say data literate, but aware of what goes into like an analytics function. They're very good at abstracting away complexity. And that's great from a deliverable standpoint, but it also down the line, I think, impacts data teams because they spend too much time trying to explain why data and analytics is hard instead of just making the data and analytics process more transparent. No one cares how hard it was to get data to you. Yeah, I get that's why it takes a long time, but the head of marketing doesn't care that there's an ETL process and you go through gold, bronze, silver staging, and we put all this work into it. That's why it's more. I think a lot of this data product management talk is helpful from a topology standpoint because it puts somebody, just like a product manager is in tech, like it puts somebody there to be the liaison between the team that builds it, the team that consumes it, and the team that ultimately will get value from it, I think. So having that person be that middle ground is really what's important because they add that transparency. So you don't have to say like data and analytics is hard. It's more about like, just look, this is where it comes from. This is what we have to do.
Hey, Austin, sorry. But the thing is, a quick answer to a quick statement from Scott should not take 3 times as a statement from Scott. Okay, it's I'm watching time now because
30
we're past time. So in conclusion, okay, kind of 3 big teams, platform but we need to define the platform because it's not very clear what the platform is. Maybe that could be a topic for one of our next talk. We have a team working on data products, and we have got a team working on data on governance as an enabler, as Scott said. So that would be the conclusion for today. We meet next week, and next week's topic is going to be data modeling. Okay, so I know it's always harsh to end up like that, and you still have a lot of questions, but that's the rule of the game. Okay, guys.
Everybody can connect with each other on LinkedIn too. Like just reach out and have one-on-one conversations.
Exactly. Okay. See you guys.
Thanks, folks.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.